Coming up in the podcast, these people who are making these claims about Amazon, using AI to identify AI, they don't actually have the knowledge to actually make these statements. They don't have the understanding of how AI is created. They don't even have software engineering understanding. They're just saying these things because they're, reacting in the moment, and they're just jumping to conclusions instead of, waiting and addressing these things as they come up. Welcome to Amelia's Behind the Scenes Author Diary, an exclusive look at the behind-the-scenes misadventures of the 40-something mystery author. Discover how close she is to releasing her latest novel, hear exciting details about upcoming writing projects, and discover the lessons she has learned along her writing journey so you don't have to make the same mistakes. You can find episode show notes and lots more information at authorpreneurpodcast.com/podcast. Hello writers, I'm back. And yes, it's been 16 weeks since I released an episode of the podcast. Originally, I took the summer off because I needed to take a holiday from podcasting and writing, but I did a bit of blogging during my break where I discussed whether you should use AI-generated images for book covers. Also, I wrote another blog post on how to work with a book cover designer. This article was originally written to help potential clients and browsers who found my LaVillain Book Covers website. But I shared the full article on authorpreneurpodcast.com because I believed it would be useful for you as well. While we're on the topic of book cover design, I discussed in another blog post the things you need to know before you design your own book cover. And it was originally written to help people understand this is how long it takes, this is what's involved, so that when they do go design their own book cover, they're aware of all of these things. Also, something else triggered that, but I get into that when I talk about the blog posts. This episode isn't just about blog posts. I also discuss my struggles with writing and the epiphany I've had, which helped me make progress after chasing my tail for so long. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. Just to let you know, this episode was recorded on Friday, the 27th of October, so this show is me primarily looking back at August, September, and October. And if you're new to this podcast, I want to say a huge thank you for stopping by and trying out my show. To those of you who've been faithfully listening, thank you for regularly listening in and supporting me. Your support means more to me than you know. So I decided I wanted to have this summer off from podcasting. Instead, I ended up writing a few reactionary blog posts in response to a few pieces of information that I've seen in the self-publishing world. And I covered topics like AI-generated images, things related to book cover design, and just stuff that I heard that was just, I sort of felt compelled to have my say and correct pieces of information that I knew were just wrong. But in saying that, that blog post that I wrote about that particular topic, it wasn't trying to point the finger at anyone. So when we get to that, if you recognize the person I'm talking about, please don't leave a comment about that person in the comments section, like on YouTube or on my blog, because I will delete it, because the point isn't for me to point the finger, it's just to put the information out there that is correct. It isn't to sort of name or shame anybody, if that makes sense. These posts were published over on authorpreneurpodcast.com and on LaVillain Book Covers as well. So I sort of cross-posted them where I thought they were relevant. Over on LaVillain Book Covers, I wrote an article called How to Work with a Cover Designer to help my potential clients and those people who found the website to figure out what they needed to do before they approached a designer, whether it was me or somebody else. That wasn't really the purpose of the article. It was just to help people who have never worked with a cover designer figure out what they need to do, because you shouldn't just email a cover designer just out of the blue once you find them. You do need to do a bit of work before you approach a designer, and this actually helps you get the best possible cover for your book if you do this before you go in. So naturally, I do have forms that collate this information together on my website, but on my Etsy store, it's like the Wild West, and I get next to no information from the clients, and this is partly because there's no automated thing that helps them fill out the correct information. I don't have control over what Etsy asks for when someone purchases a cover or purchases a custom design from me. It's just so I get people that don't quite have all the information they need. So I have to drag it out of them, and it doesn't feel like a pleasant experience, if that makes sense. So I realized there was a need for this information, and I wrote the blog post. Eventually, I realized this information would be great for my blog audience and you guys who listen to the podcast. So I cross-posted it to authorpreneurpodcast.com. This meant I had to create a different sort of blog author profile so readers could understand that I'm a cover designer too. And the other reason why I wanted to create two different author profiles or about the blog author profiles is my current blog author profile for the podcast host is quite long, and if I'm adding cover designer and all of those links, it's just this massive information that doesn't make sense. So I've created two different identities for myself, so it's a bit weird, but I do point out, yes, I'm a book cover designer too. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. So if this blog post interests you, I'll add a link in the show notes and under the video over on YouTube. While we're on the topic of Le Villain book covers, I started a blog on there as well, but this was just for search engine optimization reasons and to help my future and current clients to understand the book cover design process. The first blog post I wrote for my cover design business was about whether you should use AI-generated images for your book covers. Because my husband is in the tech industry and has an understanding of how these AI models are created and tested, I had a discussion with him about the ethics of AI-generated images before writing this post. I also wanted my future and current clients to understand whether I use AI-generated images in my cover design business, but also wanted to talk about why I made this decision. For some reason, I don't understand why I didn't cross-post this immediately to authorpreneurpodcast.com, but it's a mistake that I'll remedy before you listen to this episode. If this article interests you, I'll add a link in the show notes and under the YouTube video. One day on YouTube, I watched a video by a popular self-publishing influencer talk about designing their own cover. And I thought, oh great, I do that too. Towards the end of the video, I had a moment where I did a massive double take and thought,
I don't think so.
For the sake of time, this creator claimed that the printer at Amazon used the RGB color palette and not CMYK. They came to this conclusion because the colors on their cover looked better when they supplied the RGB formatted file. Because I've worked in graphic design back in the day before I had wrinkles and a touch of grey, so I understand this to be impossible. You see, when you print in color, all of the colors you choose are made up of cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black. And coincidentally, every color toner, no matter the type of printer, uses these four colors. RGB, on the other hand, is a device-dependent color model made up of three additive colors. And these are red, green, and blue. These colors are added to a screen, which is generally a shade of black. Whereas with CMYK, color is removed from white, which contains all colors. And RGB is used on a black background due to how software is coded. So when you send KDP a PDF cover file in RGB, you're playing Russian roulette with the colors and letting the printer decide. Unlike your local printer who will fix this file for you, KDP doesn't have the time to fix this error before printing because of the sheer volume of print jobs that their printers would do. So the only checks that are performed are for size and printing related errors, not color format. This led me to write a blog post on the things you need to know before designing your own book cover, including how long the process takes from blank screen to finished design. And I also discuss whether it's a good use of your time and is actually saving you money in the long run. It's worth pointing out that this article is not a how-to design, but it's the things you should consider before going down this long and windy road of cover design. For the sake of playing the devil's advocate, I did a lot of research and double-checked my own knowledge with other graphic designers who answer questions on forums, and I contacted the KDP customer service via chat, and I got an instant reply. On top of this, my husband has a master's degree in image processing, so I picked his brain too before writing the article. And I saved my sources at the bottom of the page for further reading. Honestly, I don't know why people share misinformation when the facts are within arm's reach, especially when they had a huge platform. And when I did my own research, I just typed questions into Google. That's all I did. And I didn't know to go to certain places, but I just looked at these sources are available. I went to the most reputable sources like actual printing companies who talk about this, forums where graphic designers are answering questions. And this information, it didn't actually take too long for me to find this information for myself. And also contacting KDP and asking the question just as double confirmation, even though it says it there in black and white in their help section. That was a very quick turnover. So, and this is what really bothers me, is that it takes very little effort to actually get the correct information, but so many people don't do it. So if you are looking for information online and you're listening to a creator, I would double check what they're saying is correct, because not everyone goes to the trouble of doing research and double checking what they know. Because I don't know, maybe I think for me, I have this anxiety where I need to know the information. I need to know information. And I constantly double check myself, and this helps me. Usually before I make a decision about something, I do a lot of research and I collate a lot of information and I double check things. I look at different point of views, and this is just who I am. And I think this is partly anxiety driven, and it helps me make what I think are good decisions at the time. But, you know, hindsight's 2020. But not everyone does this. And so just be careful, because it's actually really easy to double check the information you've been given. But I'm going to hop off my soapbox. Once again, if this article interests you, I'll add a link in the show notes and under the YouTube video so you can watch. And once again, if you do actually know the creator I'm talking about, I tried to not specify gender or the role they play in the self-publishing space. But if you do know who this is, please don't name them in the comments section anywhere under this video, because this is not the point of this. It's not to point the finger and saying, oh, this person's giving out bad information. It's just to correct something I know is out there, because I obviously plan on using SEO to help people find this correct information, if that makes sense. The other thing I did while I was on my hiatus is I opened my business up to custom cover design within the mystery, cozy mystery, romantic comedy, action thriller, and psychological thriller genres. And on top of this, I designed 2 more psychological thriller pre-made covers, a set of cozy mystery covers, and I expanded a single cozy mystery cover into a set of 3. I also formatted a few books for clients as well. So it technically wasn't a holiday. I sort of feel like that's probably false advertising. So I did other things and I gave my brain a break. If you've heard something useful in this episode that was helpful to you and you'd like to support the show, then buy me a coffee for as little as $2 at buymeacoffee.com/author80hey. This next piece is just old news, but I wanted to talk about it anyway. So on the 7th of September, Amazon KDP updated its guidelines to include AI-generated content. I wanted to wait a while before sharing this because I often find people jump the gun and overreact without reading the fine print. I've even seen people make really bold claims that they're doing this because Amazon is going to try and identify AI-generated content with AI, and I'm not sure if that's even possible to identify something that's been created by AI by another AI without actually having access to the source material as you've created it. Like, I'm not even sure how that's even possible from my limited knowledge of software engineering. I'm just not sure. But there's been a lot of speculation, and this is like wild speculation that has no grounding, any reliable sources or reality. Like, it's almost sci-fi. I'm sorry if you've made these claims and you're listening to my podcast and you're offended, but it's like these people who are making these claims about Amazon, using AI to identify AI, they don't actually have the knowledge to actually make these statements. They don't have the understanding of how AI is created. They don't even have software engineering understanding. They're just saying these things because they're, reacting in the moment, and they're just jumping to conclusions instead of, waiting and addressing these things as they come up instead of just pointing the finger. But I digress. So this amendment requires publishers and independent authors who distribute their books via their platform to declare whether their books have been created with the help of artificial intelligence. Inside the dashboard for each book, users found a yes or no radio button in which they could declare their usage. And please note the word usage in these phrase above these radio buttons. And it's like, did you use AI tools in creating texts, images, and or translations in your book? So the AI usage is not limited to writing the content of the book, but also includes images both inside and on the cover. But Amazon also draws a distinction between AI generated and AI assisted content, because AI assisted content has been here for many years now. So in the dashboard, these definitions can be found by hovering over the information text above and clicking the read the KDP guidelines. So according to the definitions, if you write the book yourself and then go on and use tools like ProWritingAid, Grammarly, and SudoWrite to edit your work, then you don't have to declare it. This is considered AI assisted. The point of the definitions was to distinguish between who actually created the copyrighted content and who didn't. So if a tool like ChatGPT wrote your book based on prompts, and this is considered AI generated, even if you go on to make rewrites. In this instance, you would have to declare it by selecting the yes button. So what if you did use AI generated content in your book? Does this mean you can't publish on Amazon? Of course not. You simply need to state which tools you used. And if you used AI to write the book, select the yes button in response to the AI question. After this, you'll be prompted to declare what you've used and how much of your content was written by these tools. While these changes to the KDP guidelines have angered some, I still believe this is a step in the right direction. In light of the WAG and the SAG strikes, it's a good thing that Amazon is distinguishing between AI generated content and those books that are not, because readers do have the right to know how much AI is used in the creation of a book. As a writer, I don't mind disclosing the details because a little bit of transparency is always a good thing. So let's address the elephant in the room. Like many others, I do have increasing concerns about the potential for AI generated content flooding the market. I realize this is fear talking, but at least this disclosure is somewhat comforting that Amazon is at least interested in knowing how much AI content is on their site. And I have started to see AI things being listed in the authorship of some books. So I don't know whether that's Amazon testing things. I've seen a few things, but I'm just not sure what they're doing. And I think a lot of people don't know what Amazon are doing. I think this is just one of those things we have to wait and see what happens. But yes, I know that's not something people want to hear. They want answers and they want it now. But I do think some things you just have to wait and see what's going to happen and not jump to wild conclusions, especially when there are no facts to back this up other than anonymous source going, I know someone in software engineering in Amazon. And it's just like, software engineering is a big field. It's a very wide career. And anyway, I'll move on. Over on Amazon, during August and September, my free downloads took a massive nosedive from 1,015 in July with no promotions to 35 in August. But I'm still seeing a 2% impulse buy on Duplicity, but in much smaller quantities. And it's too small to consider the strategy a success. Obviously, I need to get back into promoting my first in series again, but I do think this is to be expected during this time of the year. And this isn't just Amazon, but a decline across all across the board on all platforms. This could be a drop-off due to the months between now and when I publish The Locked Room in April, or it just could be a seasonal thing. I just don't know. I haven't actually gone in and checked the end of September and August. Like, it's slowly picking up, but it wasn't the same as what it was in July and the previous months. So if you're seeing that too, so am I. You are definitely not alone. So book 3 is harder to write than I originally imagined, and it's in stark contrast to my experience writing The Locked Room. That writing experience was joyous. But since my freak out about my book being out of genre, I struggled big time. I guess I'm all in my head about it, and I'm struggling to let go of the scenes that I cut. As of the 27th of September, my word count was sitting at 15,257. Obviously, I didn't write during the summer. I thought the break would help, but when I got back into writing in September, I was back where I was before my vacation. So it sort of felt like the break didn't work. But in reality, the solution was quite simple. Just write the next sentence. But this was easier said than done. So I feel like my inner writer is a bit broken, and it's been like that for quite some time. Since writing this episode on the 20th of September, I've completed 36 hours and 52 minutes of writing, and I feel like I'm finally making progress. So how have I done this? There are two things that are contributing to my progress. The first is just write the next sentence. This, I think, is instrumental to the writing in the dark process, more so than I first imagined. The second is equally integral, is I'm simply letting the story be what it needs to be instead of panicking about genre and where it's going to sit on the shelf in a bookstore. However, I'm keenly aware that I'm writing a mystery. Therefore, the story needs a lot of scenes where the protagonist is trying to answer questions about the crime, or aka searching for clues. Where I believe I'm being trapped is I'm noticing that the story has more action scenes than the previous 5 stories that I've written. The entire first act is full of action and suspense, but James is still trying to figure out the mystery and the whodunit. He's just doing that on the run. 10 of the 26 scenes of my mystery are cerebral detective style scenes, but I'm yet to reach the end of the second act. So far in the first and second acts, I have the following types of scenes. So 8 suspense scenes, 8 action scenes, and 10 need or question scenes. So these need and question scenes are those cerebral scenes that you typically find in a mystery where the detective is searching for clues. Technically, some of these action and suspense scenes, James is actually searching for clues, but not all of them. If you're wondering how I came up with these scene labels, the short answer is I didn't. But Chris Fox did in his book Plot Gardening. Obviously, I highly recommend you read this book. And from memory, I think it is just called Plot Gardening. I'll leave a link to it in the description and over in the YouTube video. But as of yesterday, my word count is at 22,172 words. This month, I spent 13 of those 36 writing hours preparing my manuscript to be read by an alpha reader that I found on Fiverr. To do this, I performed like a mini line edit using Grammarly Pro Writing Aid and listening to the manuscript being read aloud by using natural readers. And I have a premium edition of that, so I do pay for it. I think it might be under $100 for the year. Can't remember, but I do track it. But I can't remember off the top of my head, and I didn't include it in the show notes. Sorry. And the writing-related epiphany that I'm having is only I, the author, care about genre. Now hear me out for a second. The reader doesn't care about genre as much as I do. Not at this stage in a series. The first 2 stories in the series establish that it's an amateur sleuth mystery series, and as long as I don't stray too far from that, I don't think the reader will care because they're interested in the character. Just for the sake of clarity, I'm not making this up. I've done my own research and about changes in genre within the series, and most readers who've responded to questions like this have stated outright that they follow a character, not a genre, especially when it comes to series. And they don't really notice the subtle changes in genre as long as the character stays the same. Like, you're not changing the character. or making the character do things that are technically things that they just wouldn't do. As long as you're sticking to making that character the same, they don't seem to care as much. But when you talk about this to other writers, you get a very different thing. They go, oh, these are different genres and you can't do that, blah, blah, blah. You get that response. But when you go in and actually talk to readers and go and ask them whether they notice subtle changes in genre within a series, and they talk about, well, I read this series and I really love it and blah, blah, blah. Whereas writers won't tell you that, but readers will. So I think it's important when you're asking these questions that you do look at what readers respond to, because I think that's really important, because you don't write for another writer, you write for a reader, if that makes sense. Not that writers aren't readers, but it's important that you consider your audience first. So on the 29th of June, I migrated from Evernote to Notion because I received a last-minute email notifying me of a 56% price increase for no reason at all. There's no new features, there's nothing new from between this time and last year, and 56% price increase is not inflation. It's just corporate greed. As a loyal user, like I've been using this program since maybe 2015, I was really annoyed. So I moved to Notion. After 3 months of frustration, I've moved back to Evernote and accepted the price increase because Notion was frustrating to use as a word processing or note-taking tool. It was just frustrating recording these episodes because I use Evernote as my script and like a teleprompter almost, a manual teleprompter. Notion was difficult to use like this, and copying and pasting stuff from Notion to my podcast host was a nightmare. Notion isn't like Microsoft Word where everything is in one page. For some reason, when you type in a line and you hit enter, that line is isolated from the text around it. So each line of text has its own line. So when you copy it over, it copies over like a code, and things are formatted weird. It was a lot of work and it wasn't worth the free price tag. So I had to move back. I accepted that I'm now paying, I think it's like $78 for Evernote. And it's just, I didn't want to talk about it because I thought it was just a trivial thing. And I thought, I don't really know enough about Notion to talk about why I moved from Evernote to Notion. But now that I've had that experience, yeah. Maybe this is a sign of old age, but I've moved podcast hosts from Blueberry to Buzzsprout. Basically, Blueberry keep making changes to their stats, and I'm super frustrated with these changes because the changes don't add value. They just make things different. And while Blueberry are considered to having the best stats out there in terms of podcasting, I'm still not happy with them. At the moment, what really pushed me to move is they created a progressive web app, which again doesn't add value, and it just basically mirrors what's on the web. It's not different. It's not better. Also, I can no longer see the monthly podcast stats because that's how I compare my show. I don't compare it day by day because that's ridiculous. I compare it, say, October this year to October last year, because for me, I feel that's comparable. Whereas now I've just got all these daily stats and it's really difficult to read. So I'm just super frustrated, and I pulled the plug and moved to Buzzsprout, and I'm really happy. And the interesting thing about Buzzsprout is they send you podcast milestone notifications. And when you're starting out or you're podcasting on your own, these celebratory posts are really encouraging. Also, today, before I recorded this episode, I noticed that I can add in my stats from my old host so I can have a more accurate stats overall in terms of the most popular podcast episodes and stuff like that, which is really important as a podcaster to know what your audience have loved over time and the things that just aren't doing so well, especially if they're old and they're still not doing well. That's probably not a good sign. But yeah, I'm really happy with Buzzsprout. I've only been with them for 9 days at the moment, but I'll let you know if I'm still happy later on. The one thing I did during my hiatus is I've been working on a course titled Selling Books from Your Author Website with WooCommerce. It's not quite ready, but I've been busy editing videos for the course, and I still have more lessons to film and edit. I do aim to set the course at a relatively low price during beta. Then after that period is over, listing the course at a price like £39 or its equivalent, which will be around $50. in saying that the only downside is I cannot control the foreign currencies. That's determined by the platform I'm using. Originally, I shelved this course out of frustration due to the high prices of course platforms. Then one day I discovered that I could publish a course on PayHip, and I just had no clue that was even a thing. That's what led me to pick up the course and start editing the videos again. So I do have a few things to record. I think I just have to record the introduction to using MailerLite and WooCommerce together, because there are things you need to consider before you dive into the installation and stuff like that. And I think I have a few other things, but once I've done that, I'm going to publish the beta and then add in the bonus content as it's available. I think that's what I'm going to do. That's my plan so far. If it changes, I'll let you know. So that's all of the things I can discuss in terms of writing, editing, book marketing, and publishing. If you have any questions or tips on book marketing that you'd love to share with me, please come over to the blog post and share your thoughts in the comments section. The interesting thing about recording this video is I mentioned my husband a couple of times while recording, and he's sitting right next to me with headphones on. So that's why, if you're watching this going, why is she? And you notice that I'm acting strange, it's because I got an audience and I'm not used to having that. And I'm also talking about somebody who's there. And it just feels strange. Anyway, in the next episode, I will finally share the long-awaited episode on the anatomy of a scene. I put that off. I didn't share that next because I thought it's going to be weird me just putting out a new podcast episode 16 weeks after the last one, because without releasing this diary episode, letting you know what I've been up to, so that when I release that episode, it makes sense. The huge gap makes sense, and you're not left wondering. But I think the next episode after that will be another writing tip episode, and that'll be on cliffhangers, but not like cliffhangers at the end of the book, like cliffhangers at the end of the scene that gets people sort of turning a page. Essentially, how to make sure that your book is a page turner, no matter what genre you are. Even if you're writing a romance, you can use cliffhangers sparingly to encourage readers to read through to the next chapter as well. It's not just something that's purely for the mystery, suspense, thriller sort of genres. You can use this in other genres. That episode might take me a couple of weeks to put that out, because I want to go through and find examples of cliffhangers at the end of scenes in literature, and not just from the genres I usually read, but other genres like romance, and just to give you an idea of what I mean. But thank you for watching, and happy reading and writing, everybody. Thank you for listening to Amelia's Behind the Scenes Author Diary. You can find the episode show notes, back catalogue episodes, and lots more information at authorpreneurpodcast.com/podcast. I'm your host, Amelia, and I'll see you in the next Behind the Scenes Author Diary episode.